My name is Simone Brandt. I am 31 years old, and last Christmas I did something my family still has not forgiven me for. My dad told me that my brother's 25 friends were spending Christmas at our house. He said it with a smirk, like he was placing a lunch order. My brother stood behind him, arms crossed, nodding. They expected me to cook, clean, set the table, serve every plate, and wash every dish. The same way I had for 12 straight years. I looked at both of them. I smiled. And that night, I drove to Columbus, boarded a red-eye, and flew to Maui. What happened when those 25 people walked into an empty kitchen, and what my aunt said in front of all of them, changed my family forever. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge. This is the channel where one person's quiet courage rewrites the rules of an entire family. If you have ever been the one everyone expected to say yes, drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment in Maplewood, Ohio, 40 minutes from my parents. Close enough for guilt to reach me, far enough to breathe. I worked as a bookkeeper at Garner and Associates, a small accounting firm that handled taxes for half the businesses in the county. The pay was steady. The work was invisible. Nobody threw a party when the books balanced, but everybody noticed when they did not. 3 years ago, I started a catering side business with my friend Nora Castillo. We called it Brandt Kitchen. It began small. Meal prep for a couple of neighbors, a birthday spread for a coworker. By last fall, we had 4 recurring contracts: lunches for a dentist's office, weekly platters for a real estate agency, and 2 monthly events for local nonprofits. My apartment had more whisks than furniture. Cutting boards lined up next to the bathroom mirror. A commercial-grade stand mixer sat on my kitchen counter like a chrome sculpture. Nora handled operations and deliveries. I handled the books and the cooking. We split everything 50-50, and for the first time in my adult life, I had built something that was mine. Not inherited, not assigned, not demanded. Mine. The apartment was quiet in a way my parents' house never was. No television blaring from the living room. No brother stomping up from the basement asking what was for dinner. No mother sighing about how much there was to do. I kept my counters clean. I ate when I wanted to. I cooked because I chose to. But every November, like clockwork, my phone would ring. And the 40 minutes between Maplewood and Hopewell would shrink to nothing. I balanced 3 businesses' books before lunch most days. I could run a Christmas dinner blindfolded. That was exactly the problem. My father, Ray Brandt, was 63 years old and had not boiled water since 1987. He retired early from the Hopewell manufacturing warehouse after 26 years as a floor supervisor, and he filled the empty hours with a recliner, a remote control, and opinions about how other people should spend their time. He had big hands and a bigger voice, and he used both to run the house the way he had run his crew: direct orders, no questions. My brother Troy was 34. He sold Fords at the dealership on Route 9, lived in my parents' basement, and spent his commission checks on a leased truck and weekend bar tabs. He had not paid rent in 6 years. He had not cooked a meal in longer. But Troy was the son. And in the Brandt house, the son was the future. The daughter was the kitchen. My mother, Deborah, was 61. She had worked the cafeteria line at Hopewell Elementary for 30 years, scooping mashed potatoes, wiping trays, smiling at children who were not hers. She came home every afternoon and served more. She never questioned it. When I was 14, my grandmother June taught me how to make her pecan pie. I stood at the counter, flour on my nose, rolling dough while June guided my hands. My father walked through the kitchen, looked at us, and said, "Good. Now she can handle Thanksgiving by herself." My grandmother's face went tight. Her hands paused on mine. But she said nothing. That was the year I started cooking every holiday meal. I was 14. Troy was 17. He was upstairs playing video games. Nobody asked him to peel a single potato. 3 years ago, I found out that my father had fallen behind on property taxes. The county sent a lien notice, $14,000. I took a personal loan and paid it. Between my bookkeeping salary and the catering income Nora and I had been building for 3 years, I could cover the payments. But every dollar I sent to that house was a dollar I did not save for myself. 5 weeks before Christmas, I cooked Thanksgiving dinner for 14 people. Turkey, cornbread stuffing, green bean casserole, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce from scratch, and 2 pies, pecan and pumpkin. I started at 6 in the morning. By noon, the kitchen smelled like brown butter and sage, and my lower back felt like it had been kicked. Troy showed up at 1:15. He walked in, grabbed a plate, piled it high while people were still sitting down, and ate standing in the hallway because he said the dining room was too crowded. He left his plate on the counter. He took the last slice of pecan pie down to the basement without asking if anyone else wanted it. When my father stood up at the head of the table, he raised his glass and said, "Thank you all for coming to our home. This is what family is about." Our home, not Simone's food, not Simone's 12 hours in the kitchen. Our home, like it belonged to the man who had nearly lost it to a tax lien. I washed dishes for 2 hours afterward. Deborah dried, standing beside me in silence, her hands red from arthritis she refused to see a doctor about. At one point I said, "Troy could help." My mother whispered, "You know how he is." I did know. That was the problem. The moment that cut deepest came at the end of the night. My cousin Lisa said, "Simone, that pecan pie was incredible. Is that Grandma June's recipe?" Before I could answer, Troy called from the hallway. "Yeah, it's a family recipe." A family recipe. Like he had anything to do with it. Like he had ever held a rolling pin in his life. I told myself that was the last time. I did not know how right I was. December 22nd. I was at my parents' house, helping Deborah wrap gifts at the dining table. Tissue paper, ribbon, a stack of boxes. Troy had bought himself a new jacket and asked Deborah to wrap it so it would look like it came from someone else. She did not even blink. She wrapped it. The front door opened. My father walked in from the living room, Troy right behind him, both grinning. My father leaned on the doorframe and said, "Mona, your brother's friends are all spending Christmas here." He always called me Mona, a nickname I hated, like I was still 12. I looked up from the ribbon. "How many?" Troy crossed his arms. "About 25. A couple might bring someone, so, you know." Ray clapped his hands once. "It's only 25 people. Only." I set down the scissors. "And who is cooking?" My father's smirk did not change. "Come on, Mona, you've done this 100 times. Deborah was already opening the pantry door, reaching for flour, her hands moving before her brain could catch up. 30 years of compliance packed into one reflex. I looked at the table, the tissue paper, the ribbon, the jacket my brother bought for himself and asked my mother to wrap. I looked at my father. I looked at Troy, who had not offered to carry in a single grocery bag in 3 years, and I smiled. "Sure, Dad, I'll handle it." Troy gave me a thumbs up and went downstairs. My father patted my shoulder as he passed. "That's my girl." I sat there with the wrapping paper for a long time after they left. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. I already knew I would not be there on Christmas Day. I just had not told them yet. I went to the kitchen to check what we had. The answer was not much. Condiments, leftover meatloaf, half a bag of frozen peas. Feeding 30 people required a battle plan and about $600 in groceries. Troy appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. He was unusually chatty. "So, my girlfriend Melanie is coming." I opened the fridge and counted eggs. "Girlfriend?" "We've been dating 4 months. Her last name is Harding." He said it like he was announcing a merger. The Hardings owned Harding Insurance, one of the oldest agencies in Hopewell. Jean and Linda Harding sat in the front pew at First Methodist. Their daughter Melanie had a degree from Ohio State and a wardrobe that Troy could not afford. "Her parents are coming too," Troy added. "Her sister. Maybe a cousin." I closed the fridge. So this is not just a party. This is an audition. He missed the point entirely. I need it to be impressive. Like, the full spread. Then he pulled out his phone and started reading. Melanie's mom is gluten-free. Her dad cannot do shellfish. Her sister is vegan. I'll text you the list. He thumbed the screen and my phone buzzed in my pocket. A list of dietary restrictions. From a man who had never asked me what I wanted for dinner. And what are you contributing, Troy? He straightened up and gestured around the kitchen with both arms. I'm providing the venue. The venue. The house my $14,000 had saved from the county auction. The furnace I replaced for $6,800. The roof I paid $11,000 to fix. Troy was providing the venue the way a landlord provides a parking lot, by doing absolutely nothing and expecting credit for the concrete. That evening, the house settled into its usual quiet. Ray in the recliner, Troy in the basement, Deborah beside me on the couch, flipping through a recipe binder she had kept since 1994. I was on my phone, scrolling flights to Maui. Round trip from Columbus, 5 days, window seat. The price was steep for December, but my catering account had a cushion. Deborah leaned over. I was thinking ham and turkey this year. Your grandmother always did both when the count was over 20. She said it gently, like she was inviting me into a tradition instead of assigning me a shift. Mom, why can't Troy handle some of this? Deborah's hands paused on the binder. She glanced toward the basement door. You know your brother. He means well, but he's not kitchen people. Kitchen people. Like it was a species. Like some of us were born with an apron gene and the rest were excused. From the recliner, my father spoke without turning his head. Family comes first, Mona. Always has. I looked at him. The man who had not called me in 3 months until he needed something cooked. Family comes first, I repeated. Okay, Dad. Inside my head, the math ran itself. Family came first when I paid your tax bill. Family came first when your furnace died in January, and I drove up at midnight with a space heater and a checkbook. Family came first when the roof leaked into Troy's basement and I wrote an $11,000 check so your golden boy would not have to sleep with a bucket next to his bed. When did my family, meaning me, come first? Deborah reached over and patted my hand. It'll be a beautiful Christmas, like always. Like always. That was exactly what I was afraid of. Late that night, I was in the upstairs guest bedroom at my parents' house, sitting on the quilt Deborah had sewn from my old school shirts. The plan was to stay over and start grocery prep early. The hallway light was still on. Troy was on the phone, leaning against the bathroom door, talking to one of his dealership buddies. His voice carried the way it always did. Loud, unbothered, like the house owed him its walls. Nah, man, you don't gotta bring food. My sister handles all that. A pause. His buddy said something I could not hear. Troy laughed. She likes cooking. She's good at it. She likes cooking. She is good at it. I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed my palms flat against the quilt. My heartbeat was steady. No rage. Something colder. Something finished. I pulled up the calculator on my phone and typed $14,000 for back taxes, $6,800 for the furnace, $11,000 for the roof. $31,800 in direct payments to keep this house standing. Not counting groceries, not counting gas, not counting 12 years of Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, 4th of July, Troy's birthday, Ray's birthday, Deborah's birthday, and every last minute, can you bring a dish call from a cousin who could not be bothered? She likes cooking. I set the phone down. Open my laptop. One-way ticket, Columbus to Maui, December 24th. Red-eye departing at 1 in the morning, $462. I entered my card number, confirmed the purchase, closed the laptop, lay back on the quilt, stared at the ceiling I had paid to keep from caving in. Troy was still on the phone downstairs laughing about something. He sounded happy. He had no idea what was coming. December 23rd morning. I drove to Hopewell General Market. Not for the party. I picked up a bag of dark roast coffee and a paperback thriller for the flight. At the checkout, I ran into Mrs. Kearney, 72, silver perm, lived 3 doors down from my parents since before I was born. She put her hand on my arm. Oh, honey, I heard about the big Christmas party. Your daddy must be so proud. I smiled the way you smile at someone who means well and has no idea. He always is, Mrs. Kearney. She squeezed my arm and shuffled off with her cart. She would be at church on Sunday morning telling everyone what a lovely family the Brandts were. I wondered if she would still think so by then. Back in my car, my phone buzzed. Nora. Hey, Henderson Manufacturing confirmed the holiday gala for the 26th, 20 guests, full service. I need the chafing dishes and the carving station. Can I grab them from your folks' garage tonight? I paused. Then I said, come at 10. I'll leave the garage unlocked. Perfect. You're a lifesaver. I was not saving anyone. I was recovering my property. The chafing dishes, the industrial mixer, the baking trays, the carving station, the insulated serving containers. All of it belonged to Brandt Kitchen LLC. All of it purchased with my money, stored in a locked section of my parents' garage because I did not have room in my apartment. My family used that equipment every holiday like it was part of the house. Nobody had ever asked where it came from. Nobody had ever asked what it cost. Nora did not ask why I sounded so calm. She had worked with me long enough to know that calm was my most dangerous setting. That afternoon, I drove back to my parents' house. Ray met me at the door with a new assignment. I need you to pick up the folding tables from the church. Pastor Greg said we could borrow 6. I set my keys on the counter. Dad, I'm not your event coordinator. He looked at me like I had spoken in another language, then his face settled into the expression I had memorized, patient, slightly disappointed, as if I were a child who needed reminding. Family comes first, Mona. There it was again. The phrase that had followed me through every holiday, every birthday, every emergency check I had written. Family comes first. It only ever flowed in one direction. Troy walked through the kitchen wearing a new button-down shirt. Navy blue, slim fit, price tag still dangling from the cuff. Looking sharp for tomorrow, he said to his reflection in the microwave door. $80 for a shirt to impress Melanie Harding. He had not spent a single dollar on the party that was supposedly his idea. Deborah was already in the kitchen, peeling potatoes. Her knuckles were swollen, the skin around her nail beds cracked from years of hot water and industrial soap. She winced when the peeler slipped but caught herself and kept going. I walked over and took the peeler out of her hand. Mom, sit down. She started to protest. I'm fine, Sit down. She sat. We did not talk. The only sound was the faucet dripping and the scrape of the peeler against the potato skin. I looked at her hands on the table. Red, tired, bent at the joints. She had been peeling potatoes for other people her entire life. That was the last time I stood in that kitchen with a peeler in my hand. That evening, Nora texted me. Henderson wants to add 20 extra guests. Can you run it with me on the 26th? I stared at the message. 2 events on my calendar. On the 25th, 25 freeloaders at my parents' house expecting a feast I would cook for free. On the 26th, 20 paying customers at Henderson Manufacturing's holiday gala, where every hour of my labor had a dollar sign attached. 2 events. One where I was furniture. One where I was a professional. I typed back, I won't be available for either. Nora called immediately. What do you mean either? Henderson is our biggest gig this quarter. Can you handle it solo? I mean, yes, I can make it work with the rental equipment and a couple of temps. But what's going on? I'm going to Hawaii. Silence on the line. Then Nora said a single word. Finally. She did not ask why. She did not ask for how long. She had watched me come back from every holiday drained, silent, staring at the ceiling of my apartment for 2 days straight. After Thanksgiving, she had found me asleep on the kitchen floor at midnight, still wearing the apron I had driven home in. She said she had been waiting for me to walk away from that family since the day we became partners. I've got Henderson, Nora said. Take the whole week. Turn your phone off. I mean it. I told her I would leave the garage unlocked at 10 so she could load the equipment. She did not need a list. She knew every piece of inventory as well as I did. After we hung up, I sat in the dark guest room and listened to the house. The television downstairs. Troy laughing at something on his phone. My mother running water in the kitchen sink. December 23rd, 9:30 at night. I was in the hallway heading to the bathroom when I heard Troy's voice behind his closed bedroom door. He was on a video call. Melanie. Babe, I told you, it's taken care of. My sister's got the whole spread. A pause. Melanie's voice, tinny through the speaker. Are you sure? That's a lot of food for one person. Troy said it without hesitating. It's only 25 people. Same words, same tone, same casual dismissal of a workload he had never once carried. When my father said it, I had assumed it was a generational flaw. A man from a different era who did not know better. But here was Troy, 34 years old, raised alongside me, watching me cook since we were teenagers, and he had absorbed the exact same sentence like it was scripture. He continued. Plus, Simone loves this stuff. She's been doing it since she was a kid. Ah, Melanie said. That's sweet. Sweet. 12 years of unpaid labor, $31,800 in emergency repairs, 14-hour days in a kitchen that smelled like grease and resentment. Sweet. I walked past his door without stopping. Went to the guest room, closed the door, sat on the bed. I did not feel anger. I felt something quieter and more permanent, the click of a decision sliding into place. Troy did not call me a maid to be cruel. He called me that because, in his world, I was one. And I had been so reliable, so consistent, so unfailingly present that he had confused my labor with my identity. He said I loved it. Maybe once I did. Before it became a sentence I served every December without parole. December 23rd, late afternoon, earlier that same day, before Troy's call. My father had asked me to go up to the attic and bring down the big roasting pans. Your grandmother's ones, they're behind the Christmas boxes. The attic was cold and dim, lit by a single bulb on a pull chain. Dust on everything. Boxes labeled in my mother's handwriting. Xmas ornaments, Troy's trophies, tablecloths. I found the roasting pans behind a stack of old encyclopedias. And behind the pans, wedged against the eave, there was a tin box. Green, rusted at the corners, the kind that once held butter cookies. The lid was stamped, June Kitchen. I pried it open. Inside was a notebook. Small, maybe 5 by 7 inches, with a dark green cover and a rubber band around it. The rubber band snapped when I touched it. I opened the first page. My grandmother's handwriting. Small, even, slanting right. A column of dates. A column of events. A column of guest counts. A column of dishes. And at the end of each row, a dollar amount. Thanksgiving 1972, 18 guests. Turkey, 4 sides, 2 pies, $45. Easter 1978, 12 guests. Ham, scalloped potatoes, rolls, $32. Christmas 1985, 22 guests. Ham, prime rib, 6 sides, 3 desserts, $112. Page after page, year after year. 3 decades of holiday meals, logged in pencil like an accountant keeping a second set of books. The last entry was on the bottom of the final page. Christmas 2003, 16 guests. Everything, $340. She died in March of 2004. Below that last entry, underlined once. 187 meals. No one ever asked how much. I held the notebook against my chest and sat on the attic floor in the cold. My grandmother counted. For 36 years she counted every meal, every dollar, every guest. She wrote it down because no one else would remember. I sat up there for a long time. The attic smelled like dust and old cardboard and something faint underneath. Cinnamon, maybe, soaked into the wood from decades of holiday baking below. I turned the pages slowly. The early years were sparse. $30 here, $45 there. By the 1980s, the numbers climbed. Bigger families, more guests, Higher prices, same single cook. One entry from 1991 had a note in the margin. R didn't come to the kitchen once. R. My father. He had not come into the kitchen once during a holiday meal in 1991, and his mother noticed and wrote it down because noticing was the only rebellion she allowed herself. Another margin note, 1998. Deborah helped. First time in years. I closed the notebook and held it in my lap. My grandmother had documented what nobody else would admit. That the women in this family fed everyone and the men in this family ate. That was the contract. Unspoken. Inherited. Passed down like the house and the roasting pans and the recipe for pecan pie. 3 generations. Same kitchen. Same silence. June counted. Deborah endured. And I had been standing at that counter since I was 14 years old, repeating the pattern so faithfully that my brother thought I enjoyed it. I tucked the notebook into my bag. Not as evidence. I was not building a case. I took it because my grandmother deserved to have someone hold what she had carried alone. I carried the roasting pans downstairs, set them on the counter. My father had not moved from the recliner. Troy was in the basement. Deborah was peeling more potatoes. Her hands were shaking slightly, not nerves, just age. I looked at her and I understood something clearly. I loved my mother, but I was not going to become her. That same evening, I was in the kitchen making a grocery list, keeping up appearances, writing items I would never buy: 20 pounds of turkey breast, 5 pounds of ham, russet potatoes, heavy cream, 3 bags of cranberries. Troy was in the living room on a video call with Melanie. I could hear them clearly through the open doorway. Melanie asked, "So what does your sister do exactly for Christmas?" Troy leaned back on the couch. Everything. Cooking, cleaning, setting up, serving, cleanup. He paused. Then he laughed. "She's basically our maid, but she doesn't charge." Melanie giggled. My pen stopped on the notepad. I did not flinch. I did not drop the pen. I did not gasp or tear up or clench my fist. I calmly tore the grocery list in half, folded the pieces, and put them in the trash. A maid. That was the word. And the worst part was that he was right. The only difference between me and a hired maid was that a maid got a paycheck, a day off, and the legal right to quit. So I quit. I walked upstairs, closed the guest bedroom door, sat on the bed, pulled out my phone, and called Aunt Ruth. She answered on the second ring, like she had been expecting it. Ruth was 67, my father's older sister. She ran a bed and breakfast called Gannon House in Fairfield, 35 minutes east of Hopewell. She had built it herself after leaving home at 19. Same family, same kitchen, same expectations. But she walked away before the pattern could set. She was the only person in my family who understood exactly what I was carrying. When I told her what Troy had said, Ruth was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke. "Tell me everything," Ruth said. So I did. The $31,800, the 12 years of free holiday labor, the announcement about the 25 guests, the smirk on my father's face, the dietary restriction list Troy had texted me, the grocery list I had just torn in half. Ruth listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Your grandmother would have walked out 30 years ago if she'd had somewhere to go." "I have somewhere to go," I said. "Maui." "Good. And I'm coming to Christmas." "You always come to Christmas." "This year I'm coming with my eyes open. You just go, sweetheart. I'll be there at noon." She did not promise to do anything. She did not say she would confront my father or make a speech. She promised to see. And in a town like Hopewell, where reputations lasted longer than rooflines, being seen was its own kind of power. I confirmed the logistics. I would fly out late on the 24th. I would text Ruth when I landed. She would arrive at my parents' house at noon on Christmas Day, same as every year. "Your grandmother kept a notebook, you know," Ruth said. "I found it today. In the attic." A long pause. Then, 36 years, she counted. "I always wondered if anyone would find it." "I found it." "Good. Take it with you." "I already did." Ruth's voice dropped. not to a whisper but to something steady and low. In this family, the women count and the men spend. It's time to change the math. We said goodnight. I sat in the dark guest room and looked at the ceiling my $11,000 had kept from caving in. Outside, December wind pressed against the window. Simone is about to walk out of the kitchen she has been chained to for 12 years. If you have ever had someone take your work for granted, if you have ever been the person who did everything while someone else took the credit, you know exactly what she is feeling right now. What would you do? Stay for family or leave for yourself? Tell me in the comments. And stay, because what happens on Christmas morning is something no one in that house saw coming. December 23rd, 9:50 at night. The house was quiet. Ray was asleep in the recliner. Deborah had gone to bed. Troy was in the basement with his headphones on. I moved quickly. First, I texted Nora. Garage unlocked. Take everything. Chafing dishes, mixer, trays, carving station, serving containers, all of it. Load it tonight. Nora. On my way. Second, I opened my laptop and logged into the Brandt Kitchen wholesale account at Hopewell General Market. 3 days earlier, I had placed a standing order under the business name: 60 pounds of turkey, a whole ham, 10 pounds of potatoes, butter, cream, cranberries, enough produce to feed 30 people. A caterer's habit. Always order for more than the head count. I had placed that order out of habit, before my father's announcement, back when I still thought this Christmas would be like every other one. I canceled it. The store would refund the deposit to my business account within 48 hours. Without that order, there was nothing in my parents' kitchen that could feed more than 4 people. Third, I wrote a letter by hand. Short. Factual. I left it on the kitchen counter, face down, under the salt shaker. Addressed to Dad. Then I packed. 1 carry-on bag, 5 days of warm weather clothes, the green notebook, a phone charger, sunscreen. I carried my bag downstairs and stopped in the kitchen doorway. The light above the stove was on, the same amber glow that had lit this room for as long as I could remember. I looked at the counter where June had rolled out pie crust, where Deborah had peeled 1,000 potatoes, where I had served hundreds of meals to people who never said thank you. 3 generations of Brandt women had stood at that counter. I was the first one to walk away from it. I closed the front door behind me without a sound. The drive to Columbus took 90 minutes. December dark, the highway nearly empty. I passed the Hopewell town sign at the edge of the road, white letters on green, population 4,100, and watched it shrink in the rearview mirror. The radio played something soft that I forgot immediately. I pulled into the airport parking garage at 11:40. The red-eye to Maui left at 1 in the morning, connecting through Denver. I checked in, passed through security, found my gate, and sat in a molded plastic chair next to a man sleeping under a Bengals jacket. My phone buzzed. A text from Deborah sent at 10:15. Don't forget the cranberry sauce tomorrow. Love, Mom. I read it twice. She had sent it while I was packing, while Nora was loading the chafing dishes into her van, while the letter sat under the salt shaker waiting to be found. She was still thinking about cranberry sauce because that was all she knew how to think about. The next task. The next meal. The next thing to be done for someone who would never thank her. I had spent my whole life being the cranberry sauce. The thing no one remembered to ask about, but everyone noticed the moment it was gone. I turned off my phone, boarded the plane, middle seat. Stale air. The engine hummed and the runway lights blurred, and then we were climbing. Somewhere below, Hopewell was asleep. My father was in his recliner. My brother was in the basement. My mother was in bed with her cracked hands folded on the quilt. And I was above it all for the first time in 31 years. December 24th, late morning. I landed in Maui. Warm air hit my face the moment I stepped outside. Salt and plumeria and heat. I took off my jacket, stood in the sun, breathed. December 24th, 7 in the morning, Eastern Time. Deborah went to the kitchen to start prep. She opened the pantry. Flour, sugar, a half-empty bag of rice. No turkey, No ham, no cranberries, no cream, no butter, no potatoes in bulk. She walked to the garage and unlocked the side door. The section where the catering equipment was stored was empty. The shelves that had held chafing dishes, baking trays, the stand mixer, the insulated serving containers, bare. The hooks where the carving station tools had hung, nothing. Deborah stood in the garage for a full minute. Then she went back inside and called me. Voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. She tried a text. Simone? Where are you? The food isn't here. No response. Then she saw the letter. It was under the salt shaker where I had left it, face down, my handwriting on the front. Just, Dad. Deborah picked it up. She read it alone, standing at the counter in her bathrobe, the overhead light buzzing. The letter was short. Dad, I have cooked 144 holiday meals for this family in the last 12 years. I will not cook meal 145. The equipment in the garage belongs to Brandt Kitchen LLC, my business. It has been retrieved. I have also canceled the wholesale grocery order, which was placed under my business account. Merry Christmas. Simone. Deborah read it twice. She did not cry. She did not shout. She folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her apron pocket. Then she stood there for a long time, her hand pressed flat against the counter where her mother had rolled dough, where her daughter had served hundreds, where the air still smelled faintly of cinnamon from the spice box June had left behind. I did not know this part until later. Deborah told me, months afterward, at a diner in Maplewood. She said that after she read the letter, she sat down at the kitchen table and opened the spice drawer. Inside was a small wooden box, hand-carved, with June's initials burned into the lid. Cinnamon sticks, whole cloves, star anise, allspice berries. June had packed that box fresh every October for 40 years. After she died, Deborah kept refilling it, buying the same spices from the same aisle at Hopewell General, tucking them into the same compartments. She did not know why. She just did. Deborah held a cinnamon stick and brought it to her nose. She said it smelled like Christmas morning in 1990, when she was 26 and pregnant with Troy, sitting at this same table, watching June roll out dough with steady hands that never trembled. June had looked over at her and said, "You're a good girl, Deb. But don't let them make you too good." Deborah did not understand it then. She told me she understood it now. She put the spices back, closed the box, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Then she went to my parents' bedroom and woke my father. "Ray, Simone is gone." He blinked. "What do you mean, gone?" "Gone. The food is gone. The equipment is gone. She is gone." She said my father sat up in bed and looked at her like she had told him the house was on fire, and in a way, she had. The fire was just not the kind he could see. He could not smell the smoke. But every guest who walked through the door in 24 hours would feel the heat. Ray stormed into the kitchen in his bathrobe and slippers. He yanked open the fridge, eggs, ketchup, leftover meatloaf, a jar of pickles. He opened the pantry, flour, sugar, rice, a box of stale crackers. He went to the garage, bare shelves, empty hooks. He came back and stood in the middle of the kitchen, turning in a slow circle like a man who had lost something he could not name. "Where's the food? Where's everything?" Deborah's voice was flat. She canceled the order. It was under her business account. Her account? What the hell does that mean? Troy appeared on the basement stairs, hair pressed flat on one side, still in gym shorts. "What's going on?" Ray's jaw was tight. "Your sister left. The food's gone. The equipment's gone." Troy stared. The gears turned slowly. Then the color drained from his face. "Melanie's coming tomorrow. Her parents are coming." "I know who's coming," Ray snapped. "Call her. Call Simone right now." Troy pulled out his phone, dialed, voicemail, dialed again, voicemail. He texted, "Where are you?" The message sat there, delivered but unread. Ray grabbed the kitchen phone, the landline he had insisted on keeping, and dialed my number himself. For the first time in months, my father called his daughter. I did not answer. He stood in the kitchen holding the receiver, listening to my voicemail greeting. "This is Simone. Leave a message." And I like to imagine that those words, ordinary as they were, hit him differently than usual. Because for the first time, the person on the other end of the line was not available. Not late, not coming, not on her way with groceries. Just gone. Troy went into crisis mode. He grabbed his truck keys and drove to Hopewell General Market, still in gym shorts and a coat thrown over his sleep shirt. The store manager, Bill Paxton, was restocking the dairy case. Troy asked for a rush order: turkey, ham, sides, dessert supplies, enough for 30 people. Bill checked his system and shook his head. "We had a bulk order canceled last night under Brandt Kitchen. I can't get that quantity back by tomorrow. It's Christmas Eve, son. The trucks already ran." Troy tried the 2 catering companies in the county. Both were booked through New Year's. One receptionist laughed when he asked about same-day Christmas service. He tried an online grocery delivery. The earliest window was December 27th. Rural Ohio did not bend for panic. By noon, Troy was back at the house with 8 rotisserie chickens from the store deli, 4 bags of frozen mashed potatoes, 2 cans of cranberry sauce, a pre-made fruit salad in a plastic clamshell, and 2 pumpkin pies from the bakery case. Total, $382 on his credit card. The first money he had spent on this household in 3 years. He spread it all out on the kitchen counter. Ray looked at it the way a man looks at a flat tire. "That's not Christmas dinner, that's a gas station buffet." Troy stiffened. "It's the best I could do in 6 hours." "In 6 hours?" Ray's voice was hard. "Your sister could have done it in 3. The room went quiet. Troy stared at his father. Ray did not realize what he had just said. That even in the middle of losing everything, even while cursing me for leaving, his first instinct was to measure Troy against me, and Troy heard it. Christmas Day, 11 in the morning. Troy had done his best. The rotisserie chickens were reheated in the oven, sitting in aluminum foil pans because the good roasting pans were in the attic and nobody could find serving platters. The frozen mashed potatoes were microwaved in the bag. The canned cranberry sauce still had the ridges from the tin. Troy had set up a folding table in the living room and covered it with a bedsheet because the tablecloths were somewhere in the garage and he did not know where. He used paper plates because the china required serving pieces he did not have. The house smelled like warmed-over poultry and desperation. The first guests arrived at 11:30, 2 of Troy's dealership buddies and their girlfriends. They walked in, looked at the folding table, looked at the paper plates, and one of them said, "Where's the spread, bro? You said full Christmas dinner." Troy forced a smile. "Yeah, we had some last-minute changes." More people trickled in, a group of Troy's college friends, a couple from his softball league. They were polite, but confused. Troy had talked up this party for weeks. At 12:10, Melanie arrived with her parents, Jean and Linda Harding. Jean in a pressed blazer, Linda in a cashmere scarf. Melanie in a green dress she had clearly chosen for the occasion. They walked into the living room and saw the bedsheet tablecloth, the paper plates, the rotisserie chickens sliced unevenly on a cutting board, and the canned cranberry sauce still wearing the shape of the tin. Linda Harding's eyebrow rose exactly 1/4 of an inch. Melanie leaned close to Troy and whispered, "I thought your sister was cooking." Troy's jaw flexed. She had an emergency. 12:15. The doorbell rang. Ray opened it. Aunt Ruth stood on the porch in a wool coat, gray hair pulled back in a low bun, holding a tin of her homemade butter cookies the way she did every Christmas. "Merry Christmas, Ray." She stepped inside, hugged Deborah, scanned the room. Paper plates, store-bought pies still in their plastic domes, 20-something guests standing around with cups of soda because there was no eggnog, no cider, no warm drinks of any kind. Ruth said nothing about any of it. She hugged Deborah a moment longer than usual and whispered something I will never know. Then she got herself a cup of coffee, sat in the armchair by the window, and watched. She watched Troy fumble with a carving knife he had clearly never held, sawing at a rotisserie chicken like he was cutting rope. She watched Ray circle the room telling the same story to different clusters of guests. "Simone couldn't make it this year. Work emergency. You know how it is. She watched Melanie's father, Gene Harding, nod politely while his eyes tracked the room with the quiet assessment of a man who ran a business and knew the difference between a setback and a collapse. Ruth sat there for 45 minutes. She drank her coffee. She ate one of her own cookies. She smiled when people spoke to her and answered questions about the bed and breakfast. She did not mention me once. And in the way that only someone who has waited decades to be proven right can wait, she let the room fill up with its own evidence. Every guest who glanced at the paper plates. Every awkward silence when Troy's story about a work emergency did not land. Ruth watched it all the way a judge watches opening arguments she already knows the verdict for. 1 in the afternoon. Somebody's phone changed everything. I had posted a single photo on Facebook from Maui. My hand holding a coffee cup, the Pacific stretching blue behind it. I did not write much. Just, Merry Christmas from Maui. First holiday in 12 years I didn't spend in someone else's kitchen. I had posted it for myself, not for them. But the internet does not care about intent. Melanie's friend saw it first. She screenshotted it and texted Melanie. Isn't that Troy's sister? She's in Hawaii? I thought she was sick or something. Melanie pulled out her phone. Read the post. Read the caption again. Then she turned the screen toward Troy, who was standing by the food table holding a paper plate. I thought you said she had a work emergency. Troy's face went white. He opened his mouth but nothing came out. Gene Harding leaned over from behind Melanie. He read the caption out loud, the way a man reads a contract clause he wants everyone in the room to hear. First holiday in 12 years I didn't spend in someone else's kitchen. The room went quiet. Not movie quiet. Real quiet. The kind where you hear the furnace kick on and someone swallow. Guests looked at each other. At the paper plates. At the store-bought food. At Troy, who was still holding his plate like a shield. Ray stepped forward. She's being dramatic. She always... And then Ruth set her coffee cup down. The ceramic base hit the side table with a small, clear sound. Not loud, just precise. Every head in the room turned toward her. Ruth stood. She looked at my father. Ray. Her voice was calm. Final. Stop. Aunt Ruth just told Ray to stop, and every person in that room felt the ground shift. If you have ever watched someone finally stand up to the person who ran the family, you know that feeling. This is where the story turns. If this is the kind of story that reminds you you're not alone, hit subscribe right now. What Ruth says next will stay with you. Ruth did not shout. She spoke the way someone speaks at a graveside. Measured, deliberate, like each word had been weighed before it left her mouth. Simone has cooked Christmas dinner for this family every year since she was 19 years old. Before that, our mother, June, did it for 36 years. Before that, our grandmother. She looked around the room. 25 guests. Paper plates. Aluminum foil pans. Do you know what 3 generations of women cooking for free looks like? She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a photograph of the ledger's last page, the one I had texted her the night before. She unfolded it and laid it flat on the coffee table where everyone could see the penciled rows of dates, events, and dollar amounts. Our mother kept a record. Every holiday meal she cooked from 1967 to 2003. Every guest count. Every dollar it would have cost to hire someone to do what she did for nothing. 187 meals. Ruth tapped the paper with one finger. Simone found this notebook 2 days ago in the attic. Do you know what was written at the bottom of the last page? She paused. The room was still. 187 meals. No one ever asked how much. Linda Harding put her fork down. Gene Harding uncrossed his arms. One of Troy's buddies looked at the floor. Ruth continued. Simone would have been meal number 188. She decided she would be the last. Ray stepped forward. His neck was red. Ruth, this is a family matter. It stopped being a family matter when you invited 25 strangers to eat food your daughter was going to cook for free. She looked at him the way she had probably looked at him when they were children, Older sister, unimpressed. It's only 25 people, right, Ray? That's what you told her. Her voice did not rise. 25 people. And here they are, standing around paper plates and grocery store chicken. Because the one person who made this family look good finally decided to stop. Ruth turned to Troy. He was still standing by the food table, his paper plate now resting on the edge like he had forgotten he was holding it. Troy, 3 years ago, this house was 60 days from a county tax auction. Do you know who paid the $14,000 to stop it? Troy blinked. Dad handled that. Simone handled it. She took a personal loan and paid the county in full. Your father has not repaid a dollar. The room was so still I could have heard it from Hawaii. 2 years ago, the furnace. $6,800. Simone wrote a check. Last year, the roof leaked into your basement. $11,000. Simone. Ruth did not look at notes. She had the numbers the way I had the numbers, branded into memory by the weight of carrying them alone. Ray's voice came out ragged. That was a family arrangement. A family arrangement where one person pays and everyone else pretends it didn't happen? Ruth looked at the guests now. Not performing. Not dramatic. Just a woman stating facts in a room full of witnesses. My niece has spent $31,800 keeping this roof over their heads. Troy, who lives in the basement rent-free, who has not paid a utility bill or bought a bag of groceries in 3 years, has contributed $0. And 2 days ago, Ray looked his daughter in the eye and told her to cook for 25 people like she was the help. Gene Harding cleared his throat and set his napkin on the table. The gesture was small and absolute. Melanie was looking at Troy. Troy's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Finally, I didn't know about the money. Ruth's reply was immediate. That's the point. You never asked. You never had to. She turned back to him, and her voice was steady. You told your friend she likes cooking, that she's good at it. She is good at it, Troy. That's why she started a business. That's why she charges her clients. That's why she does not owe you a free meal. Ray exploded. He slammed both hands flat on the dining table and the paper plates jumped. You come into my house on Christmas and humiliate me in front of everyone? His voice was a roar. The warehouse supervisor who had managed men twice his size, who had never lost control of a room in his life, losing control in his own living room in front of his son's friends, his son's girlfriend, and her parents. Ruth did not flinch. She stood 5 feet from him with her hands clasped in front of her and said, This house was 60 days from not being your house, Ray. Simone made sure you still have a door to slam. She turned my own sister against me. No one turned me. I've watched you do this for 20 years. I just never had 25 witnesses before. The room was splitting at the seams. Guests edged toward the door. Troy's buddy Jake grabbed his coat from the chair. Melanie's mother stood up and put her scarf on. Ray pointed at Ruth with a trembling finger. Get out. I'll leave when I'm finished. The finger stayed in the air, but the voice behind it had cracked. Ruth was calm the way deep water is calm, still on the surface, immovable underneath. Ray could shout all he wanted. He was shouting at a woman who had left this family's kitchen at 19 and never looked back. She had nothing to lose. He had everything to lose, and was losing it in real time. Gene Harding walked to Melanie and put his hand on her shoulder. We're leaving. Melanie looked at Troy one more time. Troy could not meet her eyes. They left without saying goodbye. Deborah sat at the kitchen table. She had not spoken. She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out the letter I had left under the salt shaker, unfolded it, and slid it across the table to Ray. He read it. The last line. I love this family, but love is not a reason to disappear. The guests left in small groups, the way people leave a room where something has broken. Some nodded at Ruth. Some just slipped out. Mrs. Kearney, the neighbor who had told me at the grocery store how proud my father must be, stopped in the doorway and looked at Deborah. You raised a good daughter, Deb. I hope you know that. Deborah nodded once. Mrs. Kearney left. By 2 in the afternoon, the house was empty except for Ray, Deborah, Troy, and Ruth. Troy sat on the basement stairs, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. He had not spoken since Ruth had said, "You never asked." Ray was at the dining table. The letter was in front of him. He had read it 3 times. His hands were flat on the table and his jaw was clenched, but the anger had burned through its fuel and what was left was something smaller. Not shame exactly, but the beginning of understanding that shame might be the correct response. Deborah's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. It was a text from me, sent from a beach in Maui. "Merry Christmas, Mom. I'll call you next week. I'm okay." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Tell Dad I love him." Not, "Is everyone all right?" Just, "I'm okay." Deborah showed the text to Ruth. Ruth nodded. She stood, brushed the cookie crumbs from her coat, and picked up her tin. "I'm going home. When she calls next week, you should answer. Both of you." She looked at Ray. "And Ray? The next time your daughter pays $11,000 to keep your roof from caving in, say thank you." Ruth walked out. The front door closed behind her. The house was quiet in a way it had not been quiet in years. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of someone willing to fill the silence. I spent Christmas afternoon on a beach in Maui. The sand was warm. The paperback thriller sat open on my lap, but I had not turned a page in an hour. My phone was off. I did not need to hear from anyone in Ohio. I had turned it on once to text my mother, and then turned it off again. The sun was going down, painting the water copper and pink, and I watched it the way you watch something you have earned. I thought about the ledger. 187 meals. My grandmother had stood at that counter from 1967 to 2003 and counted everyone because counting was the only way she could prove to herself that it mattered, that someone should notice, that the hours and the dollars and the aching hands were real even if no one acknowledged them. I was meal 188, and I had written myself out of the book. I reached into my bag and pulled out the green notebook, held it in the fading light, turned to the page after June's last entry, the blank one. I uncapped a pen and wrote, "Christmas 2025. 0 guests. 0 meals. First time. SB." I closed the notebook and slipped it back into my bag. The rubber band was gone, so I wrapped a hair tie around it instead. The sun dropped below the water and the sky turned purple and the beach emptied out, and I sat there a little longer because I could. Because nobody was waiting for me to clear the table or wrap the leftovers or wash the dishes or drive home in the dark so I could wake up tomorrow and do it again. I did not destroy my family. I gave them the one thing no one had ever given them before, the chance to see what it looked like without me. 1 week later, I was back in my apartment in Maplewood. The tan from Maui was already fading. Ohio does not let you keep anything warm for long. The fallout arrived in pieces, like shrapnel on a delay. Melanie Harding texted Troy the day after Christmas. "I can't be with someone who treats their own sister like the help. Good luck, Troy." He did not respond. He moved his belongings from one corner of the basement to another, which was the closest thing to relocation he had ever managed. Jean Harding mentioned the Christmas incident to his friends at the Rotary Club. In a town like Hopewell, that was not gossip. It was a news broadcast. Within a week, Ray Brandt, the man who had prided himself on running a respectable household, was the man who made his daughter cook 12 years of free meals and then demanded she serve 25 strangers while his adult son contributed nothing. Ray did not call me. I did not expect him to. The man who could not say thank you was certainly not going to say sorry. But Deborah called. Once. Brief. Her voice was careful, the way you speak when you have rehearsed something but are not sure you will get through it. "I read the letter, Simone. I should have said something a long time ago." I did not argue. I did not comfort her. I said, "I know, Mom." And I meant both things. I knew she should have spoken up, and I knew why she had not. Aunt Ruth started something unexpected. At the women's group at First Methodist, she brought up a question. How many of them had spent decades cooking holiday meals without being thanked? The room went quiet, and then it did not. Every woman over 55 had a story. The pastor's wife organized a Give the cooks a break potluck for New Year's Eve. Every dish brought by someone who usually sat at the table instead of standing at the stove. I was not there, but they told me about it later. Nora called the second week of January. Henderson wants to book us quarterly. Also, 3 of the Rotary wives want catering quotes for spring events. I laughed. It was the first real laugh in weeks. I had spent 12 years cooking for free. The moment I stopped, people started asking what I was worth. February. I drove to Hopewell. Not for a holiday, not to cook. I met Deborah at the Maple Leaf Diner on Route 9, the one with the cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since 1997. She was already there when I walked in. She looked smaller than I remembered. She slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a check for $2,000. I looked at it, then at her. Who wrote this? Troy. Troy. Ruth talked to him. He's been picking up shifts at the dealership. It's not all of it, but it's a start. I held the envelope and let that sink in. Troy picking up extra shifts. Troy writing a check. Troy doing something that cost him effort and discomfort, maybe for the first time in his adult life. It was not enough. It was not close to enough. But it was a direction. And Dad? Deborah looked at her coffee. He's not there yet. I nodded. When he is, he knows where to find me. We sat for a while. She told me about the potluck, about the women at church who had started talking about the meals they had cooked without thanks, about how Ruth had stood up at the meeting and said, "If you have been the kitchen in your family, it is okay to close the door." I picked up the check, put it in my bag next to the green notebook. I learned that the kitchen is not a prison. It is a choice. And the moment I chose to leave it, I discovered that the people who loved me would find me wherever I went, and the people who only loved what I could do for them would stay right where I left them. That is my story. One Christmas, one empty kitchen, and a grandmother's notebook that counted what no one else would. If this story reminded you that your time and your labor have value, even when no one says thank you, share it with someone who needs to hear that today. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.